Hello everybody. Hello. Here we are again. Monday evening at 7 o'clock. It's lovely to be here. Lovely to see you all. Lovely to recognise your names popping up. Oh, that is nice. Yeah, I want to wave to all of you too and say how lovely it is to see you. I think that's become the thing about Monday nights, you know, so many weeks now, such a long time of being home, alone. And it feels on Mondays as though I'm saying hello to you all. Your names are familiar. I can put faces to them. I'm so happy to see you. I'm so blessed to be able to be in such fine company as you all, and to delight in this rather astonishing way of doing it, don't you think? I've enjoyed, I must say, being able to connect with people in this way, and especially connect with people from just all around the world. I've found that completely amazing. And as I say to you each week, how much I love the messages that you send, the ways that you connect afterwards, the ways that you talk about the connection, what you've learned, what you bring to it. So in this great time of change, and my goodness me, is it not changing? Isn't it changing? Oh, thank you, Claudia, for saying thank you for these talks. You know, I've said before on here, it would never have occurred to me that I would have enjoyed it as much as I have. It would have been something I very much shirked in the past, having to be asked to do something like this. And now I find I look forward to it each week. I'm very, very blessed to be in the company of you all tonight and going to talk about, I would say, the topic that I'm most asked for more than anything else. I'm a mindfulness and a meditation teacher of some years standing now. Psychotherapy is my background. I've been a counsellor for as long as I can remember. The question I'm asked more than any other question is, how can I really have a relationship with myself? How can I love myself? How can I even want to? Well, why would I want to? I notice when I'm talking with people, they ask, what's going on for me? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me that I can't see myself or know myself or understand myself? And for just as many people, equally as many people I talk with, have no idea that it's even possible to have a relationship with yourself. So that's what I want to talk about tonight. The how of that, the why of that, the what of it. It is, of course, takes us back into our childhood, you know, to be the beginning of time. The whole notion of the why and the what and the how of not having a relationship with ourselves. But when you think about it, it makes perfect sense that if you don't have a relationship with yourself that's warm and kind and loving, you'll be constantly needing a relationship with someone else to bring you the warmth and the kindness and loving that you're denying yourself. Have you thought about it like that? And it makes us constantly need to reach out for approval of others, from others. We reach to others for confidence and esteem, for attention. Approval is such a big thing. From the baseline of, did I do it right? Am I good enough? So I want to talk to you about those things and assure you that it would be a very good idea to ask questions as we go along, and I'll see if I'm clever enough now to be able to pick them up as they pass by on the screen. Should you have questions that you want to ask about this, you know, you could talk with me during the week about it. I'm as close as an email. And those of you who know Alfie will know that you can WhatsApp him a question for me, which he'll get to me quickly, or you could email Kirsty at mindfulme.me, and she would be happy to talk to you. So what is it you're asking? How to get rid of a negative phase in my life? Well, interestingly enough, by not trying to get rid of it. Let's go explore that. The negative phase in our life is mostly actually to do with how we're seeing something. It's the view from the inside out. So those of you who've sat into these talks over the last 6 or 8 weeks now will see that there's been a theme all the way through, and that theme is connecting. It's always about connecting. For me, the vertical connection of my relationship with the infinite, with consciousness, and our relationships with each other, which is the horizontal part, but actually it's based within on your relationship with yourself. So that's what I want us to have a look at. Let's see how we do with it. So let's begin. I wrote some notes tonight because this is such a vast topic that I could talk about it for weeks at a time, actually. I really could. In fact, I feel as though this is what I've been talking about my whole life. Now, the reason for why is because, of course, I wasn't in a good relationship with myself. And interestingly enough, I always had an inkling that it was possible. I think it comes from remembering when I was quite young that I quite liked myself when I was young. And, I'm thinking 8, 9, 10. 8, 9, 10 I remember as I quite liked myself. I had my own approval then, but it got very smudged and then very lost, as it does for many of us during our teenage years. Equally, many of us are raised by families where that initial liking of each other is not part of an equation. It's just get on with. Just get on. So I've called the topic for tonight's session, showing up for myself. If we were sitting here doing a mindful living session together, I would ask you to actually write on your paper, showing up for myself, and then I would ask you, what do you think that means? So you notice, and on our social media, when we were advertising, that was going to be the name of the topic, we used the quote by Byron Katie. It's not your job to like me, it's mine. It's not your job to like me, it's mine. When you really understand it's your job to like yourself, that means you be in a relationship with you. Now, how we learn about being in a relationship with ourselves, how we learn that is from our families. We learn that as we are being raised when we're small and through watching, absorbing, not what they teach us by speaking, but what they show us by how they live. That's how we learn about how to love. That's our original story. So if we're going to talk about showing up for myself, we're actually going to talk about being in a relationship with myself and what being in a relationship with me means. Well, each of us are in relationships. If we could look at how we do our relationships when we're upset, when we're cross with someone, when we feel hurt by someone, we will recognise that's how we do our relationship with ourselves. Do you see that? As without, so within. That's a spiritual and a scientific law. We do what we've learned to do. So if I was to explain it more clearly, I would say, if you've been used to feeling rejected without really realising it, you begin to reject yourself. You find yourself not enough. If you feel unloved, especially by those who need to be loving you the most, then you turn that into unlovability, unloving myself. There's much written about why we would do that, but in our early years of attachment and bonding, we need loving parents. If they don't have the skillful means to make us feel loved, connected and wanted, and because they themselves aren't, then we would pick up on their stories, and those stories would become our own without us even realising. So many people talk about feeling as though they were raised on a steady diet of anxiety, and often if I ask, they'll say, well, you think I'm anxious, you should see my mother, for instance, or my father, for instance. If you have a sense of, I feel I can't like myself, I'm not even close to myself, I'd ask how you learned that. Where would you learn how to be close? We learn it through watching. It's mirrored to us. As babies, we have mirror neurons in our brains that need us to have reflected back to us what it is we need. And so many of us were raised by parents who were not able to do that, weren't able to do it for themselves, gave us the best they could. I think about being a young mother, and I think about doing the best I could at the time. And those of us as we get older know, looking back, how we would like to have another go at the entire thing based on the wisdom that we have now and what we've learned. So our relationships to relationships begin in our relationships of origin, of course. We learn what is mirrored to us, whether it's warm and loving and kind and open, or whether it's withdrawn and aloof, or whether it's anxious. And this becomes our attachment and bonding style. So if we stay present now to the topic of showing up for myself now, we understand that what we learned back then when we were young. So I sometimes speak about it in this way because it's the clearest and easiest way, I think, to understand that it leaves us unknowingly with what's commonly described as 3 core wounds. If we've in fact experienced physical or emotional, mental or spiritual abandonment growing up, then what that automatically does means that we learn how to abandon ourselves. But intriguingly, no one teaches us that or points out to us what that means. So you may spend many, many years abandoning yourself through self-rejection. So the very first Instagram live that I did 8 or so weeks ago now was about this whole notion of abandoning ourselves. Do you remember, if you were here at the time, why it is that we turn away from ourselves, that we deny ourselves, that we practice self-loathing and forms of self-punishment? Because we learned to see ourselves as not enough. Somehow or other we were either unlovable, we were unwanted, we felt like we didn't belong, we felt unworthy, or we felt not good enough. And these are called the scripts, the sentence that feels like it's imprinted in our hearts through which we begin to see the world, our lens. So the lens of the wound of abandonment, the lens of the wound of betrayal. I feel betrayed by life. I feel betrayed by you. You betrayed me if it was your job to love me or to protect me, to keep me safe, to make me feel as if I belong. So I feel betrayed by life because life has let me down. You have let me down. Had you thought that that actually means that you betray yourself? How would we do that? The other wound, the third, as well as abandonment and betrayal, is the wound of shame. The shame, the deep shame embodied within us, especially when we were young and had no notion of this, that in fact it's not my behaviour that's bad, but it's me. There's something wrong with me at my core. there is something wrong with me. And because that thought is so stiflingly difficult to work with, we push ourselves away from it. We simply cannot bear to see that. The wound of shame holds hands with the wound of abandonment and the wound of betrayal. So many people, when I talk to them about this, suggest to me that they sit on the cusp of all three, and that all three of these things hold hands. In fact, their present experience is a sense of aloneness, of rejection, of not belonging, a sense of life is unfair, life wounds me, life hurts me, people don't love me, where is the person to love me, where is the safety? And underneath it, and holding it all together, is this deep wound of unworthiness. The notion that deep inside of me, there is something so wrong with me that I cannot bear to look at it. So naturally, when you look at all of this, you would know that you would turn away from yourself, that you would practice not wanting to feel that, not wanting to pay attention to the aloneness, to that whole sense of betrayal and shame. I don't want to know about it. It's so wounding to me, and it actually injects me with exactly the same sense of feeling as when I was little. And I couldn't handle it then, so I certainly can't handle it now. So the basis of our relationship with ourself, based on what most people just call a lack of self-esteem or low confidence or low self-worth, is actually based on a very deep connection to a belief that there is something wrong with me. There's something at the very pit of me, unlovable, unwantable, and I'm alone. Most people's deepest fear is of loneliness, because the sense of really being lonely opens into that wound of there is something at my core not right. So how are we doing if we actually take all that on board in a few short minutes? That the vast majority of us operate our lives through a deep sense of self-rejection, unlikability, shame, blame, self-judgment. Now, of course, there are smatterings of love sitting in all of that, because I can remember feeling I'm actually okay, while still really badly criticising and judging myself as not enough and needing to prove it by doing something worthy. So then we begin the notion of leaving ourselves and going off into the journey of the doingness, never realising that our sense of self is to do with our beingness. So now we're on the field of achievement. If I do this, will you love me? If I act like this, now do you see me? If I create this, do I belong? What must I do? What must I give up to? What must I abandon further in myself in order to win your approval? You know, the whole notion of these wounds and the scripts that accompany them are buried so deep in many people that we make no reference to them at all, and we have no idea that we operate from a place of self-denial, self-rejection, self-criticism and self-judgment. We just know we have this voice in our head that for many people never lets up, constantly critiquing and finding and jabbing into that wound. Now, if this is all how most of us are operating our lives, is it any wonder that we don't feel connected to ourselves? Is it any wonder that we're practicing all sorts of masks and risky behaviours and pleadings and longings and yearnings for something outside of ourselves? Because it would make perfect sense that if I'm so awful, why would I want to keep company with myself? think about how we meet people. I remember years ago when I was being taught, doing my training about relationships and the whole notion of self-acceptance through connection. I was taught that out of 10 people when you meet them, at least 2 won't even like you. Or flip that and think, if I meet 10 people, I could usually write off 2 people as, no, I'm not interested in you or you. You could have been one of those persons. Then there would be a few who could be on my wavelength, but you and you, yes, I've got time, and you in particular. So now I've dealt with the 10 people. Without even realising that, a great many of us actually live our lives like that. Did you know that? That we quickly scan and think, no, yes, no. If you're on the receiving end of that, because you have a very deep no inside of yourself, you may be constantly feeling the no coming from other people. And that, furthermore, feeds into your story of unlovability or unacceptability, that I'm the one that isn't chosen, I'm not chosen. And because that becomes your lens, you begin to live like that. I'm not chosen. I'm not loved. I will not be loved. I will have to be loved by coming up with some sorts of tricks, get myself yet another degree, earn some more money, move into a higher position in this business, look for someone who needs me rather than loves me. Because if they need me, that will make me feel safer, because then I can make them dependent on me, and then I'll feel as though they love me. And now we're talking about codependency. All of this goes on at the bottom of our being, mostly without us even noticing that this is what we're doing. These scripts that sit inside of us become the lens through which we look out at our life without even realising that this is the framework that we're carrying around with us. And obviously, in the context of this conversation, this framework belongs to a child. It's not the framework of an adult. When you think about it like that, there is healing to be done. So we embark, many of us, on a lifelong journey of self-improvement, personal development. I'm developing myself. So I'm buying books, I'm watching videos, I'm joining groups, and I'm learning how to turn myself into the kind of person that you might like and approve of, and at least I'm looking for happiness that would make me feel happier. Do you like me? Do you like me? Do you like me? And we've forgotten, of course, that it's my job to like me. So many of us get bogged down in the self-development, personal development, growth strategies that we take on without recognising that every one of them is a form of self-rejection. Because you see, in order to front up at anything, we're saying, let me look at what's wrong with me and work out how to fix it. We're constantly drafting back into this old pattern, this pattern of self-abandonment, self-betrayal, and self-shaming. What's fascinating about that is that we could be looking for the rest of our lives for the fixes to fix us. Some of us go down the pathway of a deep addiction life because we're looking for the things that take this pain away. I have such love for people with addictions because it shows me that they're trying to do something about it. I have such deep love for people who come trying to improve themselves, because immediately I realise we're looking at self-rejection, so probably the script is an abandonment script. Do you understand what I'm saying? How hard it is for us to show up somewhere and say, I've begun my journey of self-acceptance. FD, I see your question. Where does imposter syndrome fit into this, Helen? That's a good question. Well, we're all imposters, aren't we, in our own life? Because the deepest tragedy of it all is that we have so rejected ourselves that we feel as though we're an imposter wherever we go. We are hoping that you don't see through my cover, that in actual fact, I'm here trying to get you to like me. That's the greatest imposter of all, isn't it? What I want us to have a look at is the simplicity of actually beginning from the notion of I'm okay. The story of there's something wrong with me belongs to the little me. Imagine if you could begin, and we could do that in any moment, understanding that we learn to close our hearts off to ourselves, as we spoke about last week. And to learn to open your heart to yourself is to learn to fall in love with the wounded child who feels rejected, not to continue to reject him or her. We have such a relationship with pain and such a deep relationship with shame that all we do is re-wound the wound constantly and keep it alive, because our lives are about rejecting ourselves, about betraying ourselves, and all of the voices in the head are about shaming ourselves. Can you imagine what your life would be like if you came to see that you cannot find your way into a relationship with yourself that's loving if what you're going to do is punish and hurt and wound and re-wound yourself? So the how of showing up for myself, when the notion is I can only do that, I can only like myself when and if I'm fixed enough or I become acceptable enough. To whom? To whom? I promise you, every person I meet is acceptable as they are in that moment. I fall in love constantly with the people who come to talk to me, the people who join our workshops, the people that we're speaking with day after day after day online now. Fall in love with every soul who comes, because every soul is saying, Helen, there's something wrong with me that needs fixing. Can you help me? Can you fix it? No, I've never seen you before, and you think that I can help you fix it? Do you understand what I'm saying? You know, the amazing thing about this is all I'm going to do is help you to fall in love with yourself. Help you actually, instead of turning away from yourself and looking out there for the tools to heal you, I'm going to talk to you about this incredible notion that all you're doing is constantly recycling shame. Recycling. You know, you have 3 bins. One of the bins is called self-rejection. The next bin is called self-betrayal. And the 3rd bin is called how to blame and shame and judge myself. And every day we're busy recycling our garbage into these bins inside of ourselves, and then presenting ourselves as, right, fine. So I'm fine. How are you? And all the time, the wound of shame is being covered up, petrified that you might see it. More different styles of being, more risky behaviours so that you won't notice it. Belongs to the child. So how to have a relationship with yourself is actually learning to recognise that there are antidotes. There are ways of learning how to be. If someone came to you and said, I feel like I'm breaking down, I'm cracking up, this is just all too much now, I can't handle this change anymore, I can't cope with my partner and the children are driving me mad, my wages have been cut in half, I'm so frightened. Would you say to them, get out? Get out. I'm not interested in you. I don't want your gloom. I don't even like the way you're talking. Get out. But do you realise that you are saying that to yourself every day? That yourself is saying, please help me. And you are saying, get out. How tough is that? It's such an awful feeling. You know, currently, so many of us have had this sense of, I can't go places because my children are unacceptable. The children aren't allowed out, the children can't go here, the children aren't allowed in the mall, the children can't go to a restaurant, the children can't go to the beach, the children can't go to the park. And me too, because I now feel like an old child. Such an interesting thought. This whole approach to taking care has made me feel like get out is the order of the day. I actually tried going somewhere because you know I'm a bit of a rebel. And the security, doing the best they possibly could, you'd understand, had to, excuse me, ma'am, would you mind, sorry, could you tell us how old you are? And I said, behind my mask, you know, hoping I was under deep disguise, why do you need to know that? Knowing perfectly well why they needed to know that, watching how it made me feel upset because I knew they were going to say, you can't come in here. But, you know, at this particular time that I tried this, I was met with 5 different security. 2 men and 3 women. They were handing out the masks, the gloves, taking the temperatures, opening doors, etc. And I asked, okay, you won't let me get in here, but could you, oh Kelly, I'm sorry about that, but could you please direct me to where I'm going? No, because they were doing their job, they just wanted me out, so they began to say to me, get out, you have to get out. And one of them said to me, ma'am, you have to go home, ma'am, you have to go home. And I left back out onto the street, the path, and thought, whew, it's really hard not to take that personally, not to feel like, we don't want you in here, you're not on our team, you're not good enough to be with us. And I stood there, waiting for my daughter, actually, who I was meeting up with, and thought to myself, whew, for how many of us did that happen on a regular basis when we were young? I don't want to play with you. You're not on our team. I'm not picking you. You don't get chosen. And from the people who loved us, go to your room. That's not acceptable. You're too much. You're too noisy. You're too loud. You're too old. Oh. So this whole notion of unacceptability, this whole notion of there's something wrong with me is so steeped inside of us that we have forgotten that we ever knew we were enough. You're enough. There isn't anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with you. When I say that to people, they immediately want to tell me what is wrong with them. Helen, you know, the trouble is you're just too nice. You can't see how awful I am, how bad I am. And I'm so sad about that because it's not true. Do you know, I want to tell you about how we all search to be healed all the time. When I want to tell you there's too many vowels in that word. We should be searching constantly for how we are already held in love by the universe. Held, H-E-L-D. Healed, H-E-A-L-E-D. Vowels. Healed. What I want to tell you is there's a difference between healed and held. I'm already held. In order to be healed into that notion, I just have to add A, E, I. Oh, you, Helen, you are already held. Did you see what I just did there? Healed. All I've done is add A and E to I'm already held. Added A and E to I. Said, oh, I forgot you are already held, already enough, already loved. When you forget that, you don't want to be with yourself. So you treat yourself as you would someone else you don't like. Think about it. I want to tell you about how do I love myself? How do I learn to love myself? Well, it would be the same as spending time with someone I don't like very much. So I feel uncomfortable spending the next hour with a whole lot of people who I think don't like me very much. It's very difficult spending time in the company of someone that you think you don't like. It's very tough spending quiet time in your own company when all you want to do is further reject yourself because you don't like yourself. Let's not go, how do I love myself? Let's start with, I don't like myself because I have spent however many years I've been a grown-up here telling myself what's wrong with me. So it's akin to, let's have coffee. It's like me saying to myself, Helen, I'll make you a nice cup of tea, and while we're having tea, I'm going to tell you what's wrong with you. I'm going to tell you about what you did wrong today. I'm going to give you all the judgments about yourself. I'm going to shame and blame you. Because that's what our inner voice is doing all the time. It is just constantly hurting us. It's constantly saying, the problem with you is you are so broken and so damaged and so not enough that actually you'll have to go into another course, read another book, watch another video, gather yourself people who make you feel good about yourself, try harder, do more, and then, with any luck, of course it's going to take a long time, so you're probably going to be quite old by the time you actually learn. Do you see what I'm doing with this? Why is it so hard for us to love ourselves? Well, because take a relationship. So I do lots of relationship work with people, and I promise you it goes like this. I'm going to tell you what's wrong with them. Things just don't work at all in our relationship. You know, he did this and he does that, and I'm going to tell you what's wrong with her. Yeah, I've got a long list. So we get the long list of what's wrong with the other person. So I'm rejecting my partner. I find them not acceptable. I'm now so cross with them, especially in the last few weeks when we've been stuck together in the same house. So we know this story. We know that's called projection and blame. That's called actually emptying all my garbage on someone else instead of taking care of it myself. Has it occurred to you that when we get into a relationship with someone, after we stop being brilliantly in love with them, we begin to treat them exactly like we treat our inner self? Why is it that relationships fall apart after a particular period of time? Because we started treating the other person in the same way we treat ourselves. Of course, we blame them for it, because when we first fall in love, our heart opens and we feel magnificent, alive, glowing. You know, you can pick it on people when they're hugely in love, can't you? You get all dreamy and doe-eyed. You can't see the wood for the trees. You feel absolutely magnificent. Every fibre of your being is tinging. And we attribute that to the other person. It's because of him or her that I feel like this. It isn't. It's because you opened your heart to yourself. You realise it's because your heart opened and you began to experience yourself as lovable, acceptable, belonging, and wanted. You gave yourself to someone in such a way that you suddenly recognized your own acceptability to yourself. Do you see that? You began to see yourself, you think, through their eyes because they love you, but what actually happened is your heart opened and you experienced yourself as lovable. So as I'm inclined to do, because I think this greatly helps you, I'm going to give you a book that I'd love you to read. Kirsty will post up the title for you and let you know that this book is available on Kindle. You can buy it through Amazon. I imagine you can't get it in the shops here. I have copies of it, so you can get them from me. This book is called Undefended Love. Undefended Love by Jet Saris. When you're undefended, your heart is opened. When you're defended, you've closed against yourself. We learn to close our hearts against ourselves. Undefended love will show you not only why we did this and how to open into a relationship with yourself. It will actually help you to open into a relationship with someone else and remember what it felt like for yourself when you first fell in love and how to keep that feeling about yourself because you attribute it to you and not to the other person. That's why we have relationships, so that we learn to love ourselves, so that we learn to notice what we actually feel like when we finally approve of ourselves, but we do that vicariously through the eyes of someone else looking back at us. Real growth isn't learning to be better, to be acceptable. Real growth is realizing that that's actually your true nature, that you are already held, that there never was anything wrong with you to begin with, that what you're doing is defending against a premise, a script, a belief that you took on board when you were really young and never thought to re-question. The whole notion of developing yourself doesn't take years and years and years and years. It is the realization that you are worth it because you were born, that you were born with a unique capacity to bring the gift of yourself into this world, and that you were born knowing that you were loved and that you have to remember how to experience that for yourself. Now, all of the best words in the world have got the word self in front of them. Self-esteem, self-admiration, self-attention, self-kindness, the compassion for the wounded child within you. The only way, I promise you, the only way that you can learn to work with the unlovability of yourself is to go back into the realization that there are deep wounds inside of you that need to be healed by your loving attention to yourself. So a wound is a part of you that's broken open, bleeding, raw, hurt. The way that we heal it is through the saline solution of our own tears to our own heart, the realization that pitying ourselves is only the first step. So self-pity is the beginning. But to plunge deeper down into the understanding that there is nothing wrong with me, that every part of me needs to be loved. Every piece of me needs to be accepted by me. Jung called this doing the shadow work. I need to learn to take myself out for a cup of tea and say, oh, I'm sorry that I've hurt you today. I'm sorry that every 3 seconds I was aware that I was actually saying really rude and damaging things to you. I'm sorry that I abandoned you when you were little. You know, the antidote for abandonment in all communities in the world is reconnection. To reconnect back into ourselves means spending time with kindness, covering yourself with the warm honey of loving awareness, which is the smile to yourself, the attention to your own heart, not a sneer of the lip. And for many people, that is such a difficult thing to do. To learn to recognise that the unacceptability is the story of them. When we first meet up with someone, we don't immediately think, oh, what's wrong with you? We first of all reach to see, can we connect? Well, you can only connect as much as you can connect with yourself. Otherwise, you're doing the imposter thing. You're doing pretense. For you to learn how to connect with your own heart would be, I could give you 50 steps and 50 ways of doing it. But first of all, it's just the intention. The intentionality to wake up and the first thing in the morning to say to yourself, today I promise you I'll take care of you. Today I promise I'll turn my attention towards you. And I will notice when I wound you with my thoughts or with my words. I'll notice if I wound you with dismissive behaviour. I'll pay attention. So I want to say to you, you need to slow right down. I'm going to say something about mindfulness, don't you? The whole notion of learning the journey of self-love is the recognition that when you've turned against yourself, you had to reconnect with yourself. When you feel as though you've been on a journey of self-betrayal, then the opposite of betrayal is loyalty. If you are loyal to your friends, you would protect them. You would say, oh, I'm sorry, I think that's my friend you're talking about, and those words would hurt her. But can you imagine that if you could say to yourself regularly, oh, I'm sorry, that thought that I just had just now about me hurt my body. My whole body hurt. It tensed and tightened against that thought that I had. Imagine if you then learned to say to yourself, I'm so sorry for thinking that about you. I promise I'll be kinder. That would be loyalty. If you can stick up for your friends or your family members by protecting how other people are towards them, it's about time you did that for yourself. That's called self-loyalty. It just means stand in your own shoes and protect yourself. In order to do that, you need to build a boundary. Be very clear about boundaries. A really well-settled boundary protects you. It's to keep you safe on the inside, not to keep other people away or out. It's to keep you safe on the inside. So in order to do that, you would have to open your heart to yourself and get used to having conversations with yourself. Now see, I would call this the practice of mindfulness meditation. Try a few minutes every morning of sitting still, sitting straight. Fold your arms around yourself. Say to yourself, I am willing to sit here with you and be kind. I'm going to sit here for a few minutes and say, today I promise I will only say kind and warm and considerate things. I won't abandon you. I'll say, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to connect with you. Let me connect with you again. Here's the connection. Helen, what is it that you're needing right now that would be really warm and loving? In a very regular basis. My boundary is going to look after me. So, if you don't mind waiting for a minute, please, you could say to other people while you take a nice big deep breath, remember, I'm going to practice kindness to myself, which may mean saying, I'm sorry, I'm not able to do that. Or actually, I prefer not to come if you don't mind. You're looking after yourself, and it's okay for you to do that. So that's the first one. You connect with yourself. The second one is that you practice self-loyalty. You do not put yourself down. You do not say to yourself, what in actual fact you'd be really wounded if someone else said to you. So if you're going to get huffy if they say that to you, get huffy if you say that to yourself. Learn to say to yourself, I'm sorry for speaking to you like that. How rude of me. I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry my words hurt your body. So now we've done the opposite of self-abandonment is self-connection. The opposite of self-betrayal is self-loyalty. Now we're up to shame. Shame is a deep and cutting wound. And it actually is the place where I get to meet so many people and help them to reconnect with it again. Do not be remiss about asking for help. All of us on our team can help you with this. And we're very happy to do so. But the whole notion of reconnecting to the piece of you that is shamed, the word that helps you to stand in a place of unshaming is to honour yourself. You can tell when someone honours you. The practice of namaste is the God in me, the spirit in me, the wholeness in me sees exactly that in you. Namaste means that I honour within you your connection to the divine. I honour within me my connection too. That's what honouring is. I honour you as a person. And in this dreadful week we've had, with all of the horrible issues in the States, in this last week, when the internet has gone crazy, please remember that we practice ageism, sexism, racism, and every other ism you can think of against ourselves first. Against ourselves first. I don't like my culture. I don't like myself as a person. I feel ashamed of my background. This all actually needs to be held. It needs to have A and E added into the healing. Oh, I, you, us, we. The I in me honours the thou in you. That's how we connect with each other. We and thou are one. We cannot find oneness in the world if all we're doing is constantly rejecting ourselves. We must learn the practices of connection, of loyalty and honour to ourselves. Starting from today, the recognition that the practice of mindfulness is learning to take it sitting still, taking a deep breath in and honouring yourself. The wholeness of my heart within myself honours myself. If all you ever do is breathe in and say, I am with me and I'm all right to begin with. I am. Here at Mindful Me, we teach mindfulness. We're running workshops at the moment. Our class for the month of June begins on Tuesday evening with week 1. There are 4 weeks altogether. We are going to do some interesting and different things during the next few weeks. You might notice that some things will change at Mindful Me because we're going to introduce other and different ways of doing things, and we have been in the last few weeks because it's time. Things are changing all around us. When I come to do this talk next week, I'm not going to do it on my own. I'm going to do it in company with someone else. We're going to have a conversation together. We might do that a bit over the next few weeks. The understanding of learning how to be deeply within yourself, with your own self-acceptance, is actually the practice of what mindfulness is. It teaches us how to see and how to honour who we actually are within us. Anyone who's actually been listening in any way at all tonight will recognise it's the practice of making space to meet ourselves. Oh, I love that, Dana. The child in you is moved to tears at the way I'm rooting for her right now. I hope you're rooting for her, wanting to be seen and heard and held and honoured by you, my love. There is no one else that can do what is needed except you to your own heart. Once you learn that, once you learn this very simple skill of self-kindness, it really is just self-attention. It's learning to apologise to yourself. It is the most simple way of going about it. It was the way that I was taught originally. Every morning when you first wake up, pick up your notepad and write a little sentence, a paragraph that begins, "Dear little one, today I promise that I will connect with you, that I will be loyal to you, that I will honour you. Please call out to me if I hurt you in any way." Did you hear me? Write it every morning. Dear little one, dear little one, today I will look out for you. I will look out for you. I will not hurt you. I will show up for myself in my relationship with myself. I will pay attention to my needs. I will recognise that my feelings are telling me what I need. I won't push them aside. I'll listen to them. I'll recognise that the boundary protects me and keeps me safe. I will learn to stand up for myself and be truthful. But I will stand within myself. That's what it means. That I will practice self-kindness. That I will honour myself at every turn. In the simplest of things. Gosh, I think I'm quite thirsty. What I need is something to drink. It's so simple. What are you needing right now? Or my favourite, Helen, what is the most loving thing I can do for you right now? Always my hands go here. When you touch yourself in this way, you're reconnecting with the lost child sitting within you. Once we're adults, we can't go about looking out for the deficient parent to come to us. What we need is to learn to reparent ourselves. And that's actually just being a good friend to yourself. Unconditionally, in all the moments of the day, first of all, checking in here with you and then checking out with others. First of all, what is it that you're needing? Loved one, learn to call yourself by the sweetest of names. Learn to speak to yourself in a tender and kind voice. Imagine yourself as only 5. Be loving and kind. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity to reconnect with an open heart. You know, the wholeness within me honours the wholeness within you. Learn to do that for yourself. See you at this time next week in a different kind of a way. Actually, I'm looking forward to that. Thank you for this lovely opportunity tonight. How much I really enjoyed it. Namaste.
Okay as well. There is no right or wrong way to feel.